So the lawsuit says that defects in Delaware's educational funding system illegally deprive poor, disabled, and not English-speaking children from their right to an adequate education. What are the defects, and how does this violate the state's constitution?
Yeah, so we represent the NAACP and Delawareans for Educational Opportunity. And what our clients point to is the state's own test scores, showing that 2/3 of low-income students are not at grade level for reading. It's worse for math, and it gets worse as time goes on. English language learners, students with disabilities, also not meeting grade levels at even higher percentages. And it violates the Delaware Constitution because it has a requirement that we have efficient, general and efficient schools. And that means that the schools have to be good, they have to be effective.
Now, Governor Carney and other officials say that, the state spends, I think it's like $2.1 billion a year to educate public school students, and I think it's $13,500 a year, well above the national average. What's your contention, that it's distributed unevenly?
Yeah, so it is distributed unevenly. I mean, it's the case that students who need resources, they need reading tutors or counselors, aren't getting them. And I think we have to be careful about comparisons to other state spending. The other states spend a lot of money on pre-K. They spend money on other resources that don't get counted in their number. Delaware includes money that it spends on prison education in that number. So they're not apples to apples comparison. But if we look at actually what's happening on the ground, and you go into schools and you ask teachers and administrators, what do you not have that you need? The answers are things for these students who aren't making it. We need counselors to help them deal with issues they're bringing in from outside. We need reading specialists to help them get up to grade level. We need people who can help them learn English and be able to use that in their other classes. And we've got to bring those resources together if we expect to fulfill the constitutional promise of Delaware's Constitution.
So you point out that higher paid veteran teachers often leave rougher schools to go to higher performing schools, and that further exacerbates the funding disparity. But can you blame teachers for wanting to work in an environment where they don't have to practice classroom management? So many have told me that they've left schools because they're just tired of trying to teach disruptive kids who did not learn how to behave at home. So, how do you deal with this reality?
Yeah, we certainly don't blame them. What we want to do is help them. We think a lot of teachers go into the profession because they want to help exactly the students who the state is failing right now. And the reason that they're not able to do it is they're not given the resources and support that they need. So a teacher that has a problem with classroom management needs a smaller classroom. They might need other professionals that will help with that student who have skills and expertise that the teacher doesn't have. They may need other resources in the school to make that happen. That's exactly the sort of resources that other states provide that Delaware doesn't, that are essential to helping those kids learn and helping those veteran teachers stay in schools and make the difference they went into the profession to make.
One thing I was intrigued by is the contention that the school governance system actually disenfranchises Wilmington's Black and Latino families because they're dissipated over four districts rather than one where they would be in the majority. Talk about how that hurts city children and their access to a good education.
Sure. So basically Wilmington is cut into 4 parts. And it means that although there are a lot of students in the city, they don't constitute the majority of any school district. And school districts make all kinds of decisions. They make decisions about where schools will be built. They make decisions about how much resources will go to different schools. They make decisions about school-wide policies like discipline. All of those decisions affect schools in the city and may affect them differently than schools outside the city. And the basic principle of democracy is that the people who are affected should be making the decisions. And we think if the people in the city were more empowered to control their school districts, they'd probably make better decisions for the kids that are affected by them.
Think we need to go back to a city district?
What we say is we think the number one thing we need is resources for the kids that need them. We need a little bit more flexibility about how that money is spent. I think there are a lot of ways to get there. It's not clear that we have to do that by redrawing the district lines. We can do it by empowering schools within districts. We can do it by giving schools resources that they have some flexibility to spend. We're more interested in the bottom line than we are in exactly how the state gets there.
Now, do you think Carney's trying to do some of this with this consolidation of Christina's Wilmington schools by sort of putting some extra money into the pot to educate the poor kids?
I think if you look at a lot of the things that the Carney administration has done in schools, it's the right idea, and the scale is just nowhere near the scale you would need to actually solve these problems. So if you look at $5 million in opportunity grants, that comes a year after $27 million in cuts. and it's part of a budget that is hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's a good idea to put money into the classrooms where kids need it most, but no one's proposing things yet on the scale that we would need to actually comply with the Constitution.
So the lawsuit says that the Neighborhood Schools Act has actually served to resegregate Delaware schools. But in this era of school choice and so many charter schools, why is it an unfair system if parents don't exercise their options?
Right. So what we have is school choice in theory, but not school choice in practice. And the reason it doesn't exist in practice is if you're a parent in the city who wants to take your kid to a school outside the city, you have to get them there. And that requires that you have a car, you have a time in the morning, and the parents who we're talking about tend to be parents who have the least flexible work schedules, who have the least resources to make that happen. And so as a practical matter, it just doesn't happen very often. What we know is that for most parents, the most convenient thing, the thing they can do is take their kid to the school that's near them. And so we need to make those schools better.
Okay, well, as always, we could talk all day. Ryan Tack-Hooper is the legal director for the ACLU of Delaware. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.